I quietly left after discovering my wife's affair 3.5 years into our marriage. A year later, my ex-wife, who I had ghosted, tracked me down after learning about her own betrayal. By then, I'd moved to the hills. I'm not sure why I'm writing this, but perhaps someone will find it helpful now that the ordeal is behind me and I've moved on. In February of 2018, I discovered my wife's infidelity. At the time, I worked a contract job that required occasional travel but also allowed me to work from home. When I returned as a director at a technical sales company, my wife held a highly lucrative position. Though our marriage had become somewhat strained due to her increasingly long work hours and my travel schedule, I still considered our relationship strong. 5 years ago, we met at a cookout hosted by a mutual acquaintance and immediately connected. I was drawn to her intelligence and attractiveness, while my rough around the edges demeanor seemed to appeal to her. After a few weeks of dating, we were completely infatuated. Whenever we met at each other's apartments, passion took over. After 18 months of dating, we got married and moved into a spacious apartment while saving for a home. However, after 3 years of marriage, things began to shift. Though I still cared for her, I noticed her growing irritable over minor issues. When I brought up her frequent late nights and work outings, she became defensive, insisting it was necessary for climbing the corporate ladder. She also argued that since I was away for work for weeks at a time, I had no right to question her schedule. In reality, I only traveled for 3 or 4 days every 5 weeks, so I assured her that I could reduce my time away. These conversations, however, always ended in circular arguments without resolution. Looking back, I was oblivious to my wife's affair. Aside from our declining intimacy and her late work hours, I had no concrete suspicion. I assumed she had simply been exhausted from work, but her constant rejection had taken a toll on my self-esteem. She had a work phone, which she may have used for secret communication, but I never noticed any of the telltale signs I'd read about, like covert texting. She often worked from home in our spare bedroom, which she had converted into an office, and I never imagined what was really happening behind closed doors. Around September of 2017, Kathy started coming home from work less frequently, often attending evening work engagements instead. What began as a once-a-week occurrence quickly escalated to more than 3 nights per week. Although I wasn't naturally jealous, I was aware that she worked with more male CEOs than female ones and would inevitably attract attention. Still, she always gave the impression that her focus was solely on her job. The first time I suspected she was cheating was about a month before D-Day. One evening, before coming home, she made a quick stop at the supermarket. As I was helping unload groceries from her car, I noticed something pink glistening from beneath the front passenger seat. It was a bra. I recognized it immediately as one of hers, from a store she frequently shopped at. Looking back, I now realize it was a clear warning sign. She had a habit of removing her bra first when feeling particularly passionate, and seeing it there made me feel physically ill. My stomach twisted, and I couldn't comprehend why her bra was under the seat. I kept quiet, though my heart pounded so hard I nearly fell faint. When I brought the bags into the kitchen, Kathy took one look at me and asked if I was okay, saying it looked like I'd seen a ghost. I brushed off her comment, doing my best to conceal my emotions. It took everything in me to appear composed and not reveal my shock or suspicion. That night, I resolved to find out whether she was seeing someone. The next day, I started thinking about all the signs I might have overlooked. Aside from the bra, I had no real concrete proof. She worked in a large downtown office, and we lived in a fairly big city, making it difficult to track anything. For the time being, I decided to push the affair suspicion to the back of my mind and focus on our relationship instead. Hoping to rekindle our connection, I planned a special evening, cooking an elaborate meal and setting the dining table with elegant plates, silverware, and candles one Friday night. Wanting to make the evening special, I brought a bouquet of flowers and a nice bottle of wine. When she arrived home, breezing in as usual after work, I pointed out the dinner I prepared. She apologized and said she was sorry but had to meet her coworkers at a nearby hangout. Before leaving, she planned to take a quick shower and have a small snack with me. I must have gone completely silent because my stomach twisted into knots. I won't even try to describe the kind of anger I felt in that moment, but I had reached my limit. While she was in the shower, I made a decision. I took my work phone and discreetly placed it in her back seat, intending to use my personal phone to track her later. Then I walked into the kitchen and threw the flowers and dinner straight into the trash. After her shower, she got dressed, looking as stunning as ever. "All right, let's eat," she said. "Never mind, just go out with your friends," I replied. She shot a confused look at me. "Are you mad?" "I'm just sad that you never want to spend time with me," I muttered. She scoffed, sarcastically commenting on my short fuse and telling me to stop acting childish. As I stood there, letting it all sink in, she simply flashed me a sly smile before storming out the door. As soon as she left, I pulled out my second phone and began tracking my work phone. 20 minutes later, I saw it stop at a bar she often visited with her coworkers. I decided to go find her car. Sure enough, it was parked right outside the bar. Sitting in my own car across the street, I felt like a stalker, but I needed to know the truth. An hour later, I watched as she exited the bar with a man. He looked like an executive from her company. Then I saw it. He pulled her close and kissed her. My entire body went numb. My stomach clenched. I kept watching as they walked to a different car and got in together. As they drove off, I followed. You already know where this is going. 10 minutes later, they pulled into a hotel parking lot. I stopped my car on the street and watched them step out, holding hands as they walked inside. That was it. I had seen enough. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Then I lost control. I started pounding it with my fists, overcome with rage and disbelief. Something inside of me shut down. I don't know if I blacked out or had some kind of out-of-body experience, but when I came to it, I felt completely hollow. And then I wanted a drink. That moment marked the beginning of a path I never could have imagined. I simply started driving out of town, replaying everything I just witnessed. As much as I hate to admit it, I was crying out of anger, frustration, and heartbreak. About 30 miles away, on the outskirts of town, I spotted a small, quiet tavern and decided to stop in. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a drink. The bartender, a woman, took one look at me and said, you look like someone who just knocked the wind out of your sails. I must have looked like hell. Forcing a half smile, I replied, yeah, you could say that. A man sat down beside me and struck up a conversation. I wasn't in the mood to talk, but something about him put me at ease. Eventually, my wife's infidelity came up. I told him that all he wanted was to get away from her and forget she ever existed. You're not alone, buddy, he said, giving me a reassuring pat on the back. I went through the same thing a few years ago. I think these things happen for a reason. Right now, your life can go in a positive or negative direction. It's entirely up to you. His words shook me out of my haze. Despite the pain, I'd always tried to approach things rationally, and he was absolutely right. We introduced ourselves. His name was Ray, and I liked his down-to-earth attitude, even though he was more of a country guy. So, are you planning to move out? He asked. I hadn't even considered that yet. I was in pure fight or flight mode, and the only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't stay around my wife any longer. I have an idea, Ray said. I really feel for your situation. When the time comes, I've got a mobile trailer on my land. It's nothing fancy and needs some work, but if you want to check it out, I'll give you a great deal. You could even park it on a nice piece of property I own. It'd be a great place to clear your head. Plus, I'd appreciate someone keeping an eye on it for me. I took a moment to process the offer. It was unexpected, but for the first time that night, I saw a glimmer of an escape, an option beyond drowning in my own misery. If I had a chance to escape my crazy ex-husband years ago, I would have jumped at the opportunity to live in that trailer or anywhere just to clear my mind, the bartender chimed in, having been listening to our conversation. Maybe this was exactly what I needed, but the whole situation felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I'll think about it and maybe check it out, I told Ray. After chatting for a while longer, we agreed to meet at his place in a few days. For the first time, felt like I had a plan, an actual way to distance myself from the nightmare I was living. One thing was certain, I never wanted to spend another moment with my wife. Now, I'd always found cheating to be disgusting, the one thing I swore I would never tolerate. Now, here I was, sitting in my own home, trying to process the betrayal. That evening, as I sat on the couch, Kathy emerged from the bedroom. Where have you been? She asked. I turned to face her. Where have you been? You know, I went out for drinks, she said casually. I looked in her in the eye and asked directly in point blank, are you having an affair? She looked startled for a moment, but quickly collected herself. No, why would you even ask me that? I heard you might be seeing someone from work, I replied. Who told you that? She shot back. Someone I know, I said, deliberately withholding a name. She scoffed. You're being ridiculous. Then she accused me of being drunk and paranoid. I'm going out with drinks for friends, I said, ignoring her deflection. Though she clearly wanted to question me further, she didn't push. Instead, she turned and went back to her bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Now that I had undeniable proof of her deception, I made the choice to sleep on the couch. Not that it mattered, but I just couldn't sleep at all. My mind was consumed with the image of her in bed with that man. I felt disgusted, humiliated, but then I thought about Ray's trailer. The idea of leaving, of having a place to go, suddenly lifted my spirits. It was almost like a revelation. Something inside me had already made the decision for me. The fight or flight response had kicked in, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was choosing flight. The next morning, we barely spoke. The weekend passed as if nothing had happened, though the weight of what I knew lingered beneath the surface. A few days later, I met with Ray as planned. When I arrived, I was surprised to see that Ray's ranch was beautiful, and the trailer was much nicer than I expected, about 26 feet long and fully furnished. It reminded me of a fun spring break trip I'd taken with friends back in college. Ray accepted the money I offered him for the trailer, though honestly, I felt like I was getting it for next to nothing. After he gave me directions, I drove over to see the property where I'd be staying. It was stunning, lush with trees and scrub vegetation, surrounded by hiking and biking trails. The area sat near the foothills of a mountain range, and Ray had a small cabin on a hilltop overlooking the land. The site had electricity and water access, making it ideal for the trailer. Ray assured me that he'd set up everything and moved the trailer to the spot. In the following weeks, I tried to get Kathy to admit the truth, but all I got was gaslighting. I even warned her bluntly that if I found out she was cheating, there would be no turning back. Rather than acknowledge everything, she only sat deeper into denial, growing more defensive and lashing out. The excuses were so ridiculous that I almost found them laughable. I kicked myself for not taking pictures of her with the other man. Without hard evidence, I had no way to prove her infidelity, but deep down, I knew the truth, and that was enough. After enduring weeks of emotional turmoil, I made a decision. I was leaving, but instead of confronting her, I started making quiet preparations. While Kathy was at work, I slowly moved my belongings out of the apartment and into the trailer. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control. Ironically, during this time, Kathy's behavior shifted. She became much more polite and even acting like she wanted to reconnect. But to me, it was too late. Way too late. After all, I needed my own space. She continued going out for company events, and one evening, as she was getting ready to leave, I got ready as well. She glanced at me and asked, "Where are you going?" I shrugged. "Meeting up with some friends. You wouldn't enjoy all the shop talk." And with that, I walked out the door. "You don't know them," I interrupted as Kathy started asking more and more questions. It was the exact phrase she used on me whenever I asked if I could join her on office outing. "All right, have a good time," she said, though her expression showed she was slightly offended. "I definitely will," I replied. As I worked on the trailer and spent time with Ray at the bar, I started feeling better. His family and friends were genuinely good people, and being around them helped me regain some sense of normalcy. I also made a conscious decision to cut back on my drinking. It would have been easy to drown my emotions in alcohol, but I knew better than to let myself fall into that trap. The following week, Kathy mentioned she'd be traveling for work. She said the executive team and a few department heads were going. When I asked exactly who was attending, I couldn't help myself. I glanced at her and said, "Hope you have a great time with your boyfriend." I regretted it instantly. It triggered an explosive argument, but as Ray told me, it didn't really matter. Looking back, I do wish I'd learned more about the guy she was with, but Ray's words stuck with me. It doesn't matter who he is. What matters is the fact that she chose to betray betray you. She destroyed your marriage, whether she admits it or not. Facts are facts, brother. Honestly, Ray should write a book for people who've been betrayed. I realized I had the perfect opportunity to leave while Kathy was away on her work trip. The moment she left, I packed everything that was mine. Clothes, laptops, personal equipment. I took nothing that we had shared. No furniture, no unnecessary item. Before walking out, I left a note on the kitchen table. Initially, I wrote a long explanation, but in the end, I kept it simple. I hope it was worth it. On top of the note that I wrote, I placed my wedding ring. As I walked out the door, I felt something shift inside of me. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks suddenly lifted. The pain wouldn't vanish overnight, and I knew I still had some baggage to work through, but I had taken the first step. I didn't yell. I didn't demand a confession. She didn't deserve it. In my mind, she had already disregarded everything. Our home, our future, our dreams of starting a family. Now, it was all gone. There was no turning back. I owed her nothing. She could deal with all the consequences of her actions on her own. I hadn't planned my next move. I hadn't even called a lawyer. All I wanted was a fresh start and some clarity. As I settled into the trailer, breathing in the crisp mountain air, I finally felt free. The following week, I started running again, and for the first time in a long time, I remembered what it felt like to be alive. Meanwhile, Kathy sent me texts like, "We just landed, we're having so-and-so, yada yada yada." But while Kathy was away, she continued sending updates like, "We're having a team dinner," and similar messages. Then the questions started coming. Where are you? Why haven't you gotten back to me? I ignored them all. And when she returned home, my phone exploded with calls and texts. She kept trying to reach me, but I refused to respond. Even her mother started calling me after the first date, but I didn't answer. She never even attempted to contact my father. He and I aren't that close, and he's the only family I have left. As the days passed and I continued ignoring her, her messages grew more urgent. "What is this? We need to talk. I don't know what you think you know, but nothing is happening. This isn't an affair." After a full week of silence, she finally sent the message I'd been expecting. "I'm sorry. Things got out of hand. It didn't matter that I was involved with someone at work. You were gone a lot, and I was busy with my job. I just made a mistake. I was planning to end it. A mistake. I had been waiting for her to finally admit it, but hearing it only made me despise her more. Why couldn't she just be honest from the start? Affairs don't last 6 to 8 months or a year by accident." Her desperate attempts to get me back quickly turned pathetic. She begged me to return and work on the marriage, but I refused to respond. Even after she stopped messaging me for a few weeks, I had no intention of letting her back into my life. I didn't even want her to know where I lived. My new home, my haven, was mine, and I wouldn't let her taint it. Then her messages shifted from pleading to insults. "You're a coward. One day you'll regret not talking to me. You have no respect for what we had. Please come home so we can talk. Tell me where you are. I just want to see you, Paul. Let's fix this." And now, I don't remember every message, but they all felt hollow, full of excuses and lacking any real remorse. I ignored them all. Eventually, I changed my phone number. I received an email from Kathy saying that she hired a good lawyer and was filing for divorce. I replied with a simple, "Okay, that sounds good to me." That response triggered another barrage of emails, requests to meet, attempts to talk things over, anything to get a reaction out of me. Then she tried a different approach. "I'll stop bothering you if you agree to an uncontested divorce. Fine by me." The moment I consented, I was truly free. A few months later, I officially moved out of our apartment, and I never had to see her again. It seemed to matter more to her than it did to me. Neither of us got closure, but I didn't need it. For a while, I still thought about her occasionally. Sometimes the memories would hit unexpectedly, like when I heard a song we used to love. But over time, I stopped thinking about her at all. Now, the divorce is finalized. Life is good. Ironically, I met someone new just down the hill from my place. I was out running on the trail when I stopped to help her change a flat tire. We hit it off instantly. She's a few years younger than me, but she's kind, funny, and absolutely adorable. She calls me her mountain man and loves my lifestyle. Now, I'm in no rush to commit again, but I also have no intention of giving up on relationships altogether. As for moving out of the trailer, no way. I love it here. Being outdoors and simplifying my life has made everything easier, including processing my grief and moving on from my ex-wife. I know everyone handles situations like this differently, but I was lucky. Our marriage was only in its 3rd year, and we didn't have children. Looking back, I believe I did what was best for myself. You don't have to stay with someone who cheats. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, please just don't overthink it. Just keep moving forward. Focus on improving yourself, and things will get better. I hope everyone finds happiness in life. I've rewritten this post about 5 times just to make it as clear as possible, but I also wanted to share an update about my ex-wife. As I mentioned before, I was worried she might be trying to track me down. I moved 2 hours away after leaving our old place. Last weekend, I ran into her at a coffee shop near my home. It didn't feel like a coincidence. Fortunately, I managed to slip away before she saw me. This past weekend, I went into town for groceries and made a stop at my usual coffee shop. I was using the free Wi-Fi to finish some work when I packed up and headed outside. As I walked toward my truck, I suddenly heard someone calling out, "Paul!" I turned and saw Kathy across the street. My ex-wife was waving at me, and just like that, it happened. She rushed across the street, heading straight for me. I stood there stunned. For a moment, it almost felt like she expected some kind of warm reunion. She reached out her hand, but instinctively, I put my palms up, stopping her in her tracks. Her face fell. I could see the pain in her expression. "I've been looking for you, Paul. Ever since I heard you moved here, I've wanted to see you. Can we talk?" I felt trapped, like a caged animal, cornered. But against my better judgment, I agreed. "All right, let's find a table or something. We can talk for a minute." When she asked if we could go to my place, I shut down that immediately. Instead, she followed me to a bench outside a small shop at the end of the street. She started by commenting on how much I had changed, how different I looked. She gushed about my beard, my level of fitness, and how much my body had transformed. She was laying it on thick. Dressed in a tank top and small white shorts, with her her hair tied up in a ponytail exactly the way I used to love. She was clearly trying to turn up the charm, but my guard was up. I could see what she was doing. Then she finally got to the point. She apologized for the affair, claiming that karma had hurt her hard after I left. When her employer found out about the affair, things became so tense that she had eventually resigned. Her affair partner, who was engaged at the time, was reprimanded and transferred to another department. When he tried to shift the blame onto her, she responded by telling his fiancé the truth. That revelation ended their engagement. At that moment, she lowered her head and began to cry. I didn't say a word. I just sat there watching. Kathy straightened up, her gaze locked on the mine. What do you want from me? I asked. She assured me that she never intended to have an affair. She claimed she got caught up in office politics, that her AP used his charm and influence to manipulate her. At the same time, she admitted that she had taken advantage of him just as much as he had taken advantage of her. She insisted that after I confronted her about cheating, she had planned to confess, but instead she drank after work to numb her guilt because she loathed herself for what she had done. She said she felt stupid, alone, and as if her heart had shattered with loss after I left. According to her, she broke off things immediately with her AP after I was gone. She claimed she had to find me to see if there was any chance of reconciliation. Since I had refused to speak with her or acknowledge her existence, she was desperate for a fresh start. Even though she knew we were divorced, she'd still hoped we could begin fresh again. I just stared at her. Then I let her have it. You have no right to come here and try to undo all the damage you've caused. Do you honestly think I can just forget everything you did to destroy our marriage? I told you before, if you cheated, we were done. There is no forgiveness. You killed this relationship the moment you betrayed me. You ruined everything we had. How stupid do you think I am? She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. One night, I watched you walk into a hotel with him. Did you know that? My voice had gotten louder. I could sense people around us beginning to notice. She grabbed my arm, her body trembling, and started crying. I let her sob against my shoulder for a moment before pushing her away. I deserve all of this, she whispered, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. I know I do. Then she hesitated before adding, if nothing else, will you at least let me take you out to dinner? I just want to talk. I need us to be completely honest about everything. Please, Paul, you spent more time away from me than you ever did with me. I love you so much, even if you don't want to hear it. I never realized how much I loved you until you were gone. She was sobbing uncontrollably now, gasping for air as she tried to speak. You broke me just as much as I broke you. I can't forgive myself, and I don't want to, not until the day I die. Seeing her in that state, hyperventilating and completely unraveling, I did the only thing I could think of. I lifted her up and hugged her. And now, it wasn't because I wanted to. It wasn't because I forgave her. It just felt like the only way to stop her from falling apart right there in the middle of town. We walked together until we found a quieter spot to continue talking. Once she calmed down, I asked, how did you find me? Did you hire a private investigator? She thought for a moment before shaking her head. No, she said with a small, almost embarrassed laugh. Then she explained she had run into Stacy a few weeks ago and casually asked how I was doing. At first, Stacy didn't say anything, but when Kathy pressed on, she eventually slipped up, mentioning that she had seen me around town. She didn't know exactly where I lived, only that I was nearby and usually came into town on my days off. So Kathy started showing up, hoping to run into me. I let out a dry laugh. Stacy, you can't keep your mouth shut. Kathy blushed, looking slightly guilty. And somehow, despite everything, we found ourselves sitting there staring at each other, both knowing that whatever happened next would define everything. We had dinner at a charming little restaurant with a patio. I made sure we didn't drink. I wasn't going to give her any excuse to say I'd been kind to her or that she was too inebriated to drive home. Surprisingly, we had a good conversation. When the evening ended, I walked her to her car. She insisted that she hadn't dated anyone since I left and swore that I was the only person she wanted. She pushed hard for me to stay longer, hoping I'd give her another chance. No, it's way too early for me to go down that road, I told her. She begged me to come back, but I didn't say yes, and I didn't plan on it. Instead, I gave her my new email address. Nothing more. When she had asked for my phone number, I shut that down immediately. You just blow up my phone with text and calls. She cried at that, but in the end, she accepted my decision. Before she left, she told me she'd email me with details about her return to town the following weekend. As she was about to get into her car, I asked her directly, would you have forgiven me if I had been the one who cheated? She paused to think before answering. Yes, in time, but only if we went to marriage counseling, worked through the healing process, and we had a binding agreement. All right, I replied. Maybe I could do that too in 5 or 10 years. I would wait if that's what it took, she said. Then she took both of my hands, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, Paul, I will always love you, and I will do anything to prove it. Her words caught me off guard. Even after she left, they lingered in my mind, unsettling me. Despite feeling better about the situation, I still couldn't envision us ever getting back together. At best, maybe I could see her as a friend, but even that felt a little uncertain. I went home, went for a long run, drank a beer, and thought about how far I'd come. Could someone guarantee me that she wouldn't ruin the peace I'd built for myself? I had no idea. Now, I had time to figure things out, to gain perspective, but it was all still too fresh in my mind. This would probably be my last update. When I first posted my story on Reddit, the moderators kept taking it down. So here's the short version. I ghosted my ex-wife for over a year before she finally tracked me down. She wanted to reconcile and start over, and if you're expecting me to be the typical blue pill fool and forgive her, you'll be disappointed. Last week, she sent me a long email expressing her love and deep regret over the affair. She even offered to come stay with me for the weekend. My response, silence. I made it clear that I had no intention of making amends with her. I told her I was completely happy living alone, enjoying my quiet, secluded life and keeping things simple. At 32, I'm in no rush to change anything. I have my own plans, my own sense of independence, and I've enjoyed the company of a few women and new friends along the way. In my reply, I made the one thing crystal clear. Reconciliation is off the table, Kathy. I refuse to give her my phone number. I no longer know you, and I don't trust you. You made your bed, now lie in it. I wished her the best and told her that maybe one day we could be friends, but not now. She didn't take my response well. Frustrated by my reluctance, she finally admitted that she had accepted a job in another state. Her real plan, she wanted me to go with her. Since I worked remotely, she assumed relocating together would be easy. In her mind, a fresh start somewhere new could erase everything that had happened. That's why she had come to see me in person, to try one last time to convince me before she had to leave. Fortunately, she was out of time. I had a week-long business trip scheduled, so she wouldn't get another chance. Honestly, I'm relieved. Knowing she'll soon be out of my life for good is a huge weight off my shoulders. Eventually, she'll have to accept that our time together is over. I wouldn't be surprised if she sends me a few more emails, but in the end, she'll have to move on. She'll find someone new, maybe even repeat the same mistakes with them. Now, to anyone reading this, live your life. Let go of the past. Have the strength to move on. Wishing you all the best. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real life stories. Thank you.